it's not like I'm promoting like, no, you should just totally shift to a completely selfish life. I'm more of the mind of, how do we serve ourselves so that we can also serve other people better? Because we don't serve well when we're drained and empty and feeling frustrated by our lives, or going home every day and just wanting to cry ourselves to sleep. We're not helping people as well when we're feeling that way.
Welcome to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. This episode is sponsored by the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. Hi, I'm Janine Wolf, and I'm your colleague down the hall. I have a passion for helping fellow therapists get the clinical and collegial support we all need to do this work. And wow, it just keeps getting harder every day. I'm the founder and facilitator of the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. I have been a social worker for almost 30 years, and I own a successful solo online private practice. More of us than ever are practicing in solo or online practices, and we all need colleagues to process cases with, commiserate with on those really hard days, and also to celebrate our successes with. In this podcast, I'll bring you insights about trends and changes in our field and sit down with amazing therapists who are doing amazing work. We'll discuss fictionalized cases, ways to practice sustainably, and of course, there will be plenty of laughing. I love laughing with friends. I'm so glad to have you as one of my colleagues down the hall. Hello, everyone. You are listening to another episode of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. I'm your host, Janine Wolf, joined today by Andrea Shipley. Andrea is a licensed professional counselor in Virginia and a lifestyle design coach, helping people become healthier and more present and more satisfied with their day-to-day lives. She's designed her lifestyle and businesses around her love of travel and exploration. She's been traveling full-time in a converted school bus since 2019, and I totally love that. So today we're going to talk about lifestyle design for therapists as a tool for self-care and sustainability, and how recent cultural changes are providing some new possibilities, opportunities. Yeah. Welcome, Andrea.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And I always love to see you in your bus anytime we talk.
Thanks. Yeah.
It's a cool setup you have there. Okay, so let's start with, what is lifestyle design?
Yeah, I think of designing your life as taking responsibility for what you see in your life and what you experience and how you experience it. So, I actually just listened to a talk this morning. Oprah Winfrey just wrote a book about how to build the life you want. So I think it's just a super relevant thing right now. And so it seems to me that a lot of burnout and dissatisfaction and unfulfillment often comes from people feeling like they have to just sort of bend themselves over backwards to fit into their job role, to fit into like pre-prescribed family roles and cultural roles. And I think it takes a lot of us further away from our authenticity than is good for us. And so, I sort of flip it on its head, and I'm interested in what happens when we design a lifestyle around our authenticity instead of kind of putting the authenticity in the bin and figuring we'll get back to it when we're retired or something like that. So, yeah.
And I think
we love every day.
What?
How do we love every day?
Oh, right. Isn't that the goal? Everyone wants to live their life every single day. And I feel like the pandemic really was a chance for a lot of people to slow down enough to realize how unhappy they were and in whatever jobs or careers they had. And they were like, okay, this isn't working for me anymore. And now I actually have a chance to see if I can do it in a different way.
Yeah. Who would have thought it would be such a blessing for so many people, and that they would, so many people got just a totally different perspective on their lives and how they were spending their time and really got to rethink that, which is, I think, really exciting. And I just hope that they don't all feel like they have to, stop doing that now that they're being kind of called back into the offices and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting seeing how some of like the bigger companies are handling this, because they're like, you have to come back to the office now. And people are like, but what if we say no? Like people have the courage, I think, for the first time to say, all right, we've proven that we can do it a specific way. We don't have to do it your way. We can do it other ways, you know?
Yeah. I think that word courage is such a big piece of it. Most people don't really get to that point of having the courage to even really fully conceptualize what they want, let alone go for it, which, yeah, I like to think that's changing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is something that you talk through, so you offer services, consulting services with helping people who want to learn about lifestyle design. Specifically, if we're talking about therapists, I could imagine that. So I'm thinking back to the very beginning phases of starting a private practice. And there's so many things to figure out, like what are the ideal office hours for you and your personality and your bandwidth, and what kind of policies work for you, and how many sessions can you have back to back before you need a break, and scope of practice, all of that kind of stuff. So those are the types of things you're talking about, right? For some of this.
Absolutely. And even just hearing you say it, it made me think about when I was employed at a wellness center and I didn't have any of those choices. I couldn't make any of those choices for myself. But I think it's just really powerful when we can actually tune in, like you said, to our bandwidth and our energy levels, and then design from that understanding. It really, it's a privilege. It's a luxury, but I'm hoping it becomes kind of more of the new norm, so that just so that people don't feel like they're out of touch with themselves.
Right. Yeah. And I think something that people don't, until they've been in private practice for a while, and obviously it depends on if you're with a group practice, you're going to have to follow their rules or whatever. But when you work for yourself, we have so much flexibility in being private practitioners. Like we can have, when my kids were younger, I worked a very different schedule. So I could be home at various times. When they were in college, I had to shift things up again. And so we have lots of flexibility in saying, okay, I'm getting really burnt out, so I'm going to reduce my caseload and look for other options to bring in some income. Like we really have a lot of flexibility in this field to do those things.
Yeah, with private practice, no doubt. And even with that, I would wonder how many people still feel like they don't have flexibility and freedom, because I think that sometimes that becomes kind of a mindset thing.
Yeah.
It seems to me that, I do all these calls with people, and part of it is asking them what they would love to see happen in their lives. And so often people revert right back to just all the things that are wrong and all the things that they're sick of. And so I have to pull them back again and again and again, because we're just not even used to thinking along those lines. And so that can really interrupt our creativity a lot of the time, because when we do start to think about, how do I get from point A to point B, we might immediately just have 5, 6, 20,000 different thoughts about all the reasons why we can't do it. And then that becomes the central focus of our attention, rather than the actual outcome that we want and all of the ways that we want to feel as a result of getting there or moving there. So yeah, that's just, there's like a mental flexibility that I think we need to work for, even if we already have that schedule flexibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love the word courage, because a lot of it is making changes that people aren't necessarily out there saying like what you're saying, like how can you, what would make you the happiest? What would work best for your life? And when no one's telling you that you can do that, sometimes it's hard to do. One of our clinical consultation groups, we were talking about outsourcing. And I was saying that I struggled initially with the way I was raised, that I realized financially it made more sense for me to pay someone to clean my house, because in those 3 hours, I could make a lot more money seeing clients. She loves to clean. I don't. And it would actually be more lucrative for me. But in my mind, I was like, oh gosh, that makes me lazy, all of these other thoughts. And I had to just push through that. And then like really putting it down in black and white at the numbers, looking at the numbers, I'm like, okay, this just makes more sense. So I'm going to just step out there and do that and hope that I don't get crushed by my family for doing that,
Good for you. Yeah, that's a life goal of mine. Once I have a bigger house, it'll make sense to do that. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it is interesting how we get all of those ideas imposed on us of, what's okay and what's not okay, and, or what's lazy even, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I could see this really guiding therapists who, we go back to those beginning in a private practice, all the decisions you have to make and things like, am I going to take insurance or not? And what's right for me? And the conditioning we had in school that we're never going to make money, but we're going to make a difference in the world, and turning that on its head and saying, there's lots of different ways to do this. You can take insurance, you can not take insurance, you can do a little bit in the middle, which is what I do. And, you can create policies. And so values is a big thing for me, which I think probably goes hand in hand what you're talking about. And I learned that if the policies I created for my practice don't align with my values, then I'm never going to feel confident telling that policy to a client and upholding it. So there have been some policies where people are really strict about how they impose them. And one of them is late cancellation, no-show fees. And I understand why people enforce that income-wise and all of that. But then there are also aspects of that in my policy that didn't align with my values in certain aspects. So I'm not as consistent with that, but that works for me. And another person might say, well, maybe you have more flexibility with your income than I do, so I have to enforce that every time.
Mm-hmm. I think about how values kind of can butt heads sometimes, like we talk about it like it has to be either I do a good job and I help people or I make money. And so I think what Amber Lyda and all these other therapists are really exploring right now is challenging that idea and looking at how both can be true, which is also what's going on in lifestyle design, right? Because, how do we break free of those assumptions about how it has to be? And for instance, I wanted to be a therapist, but I also wanted to travel the country. And I didn't want to be limited to only being able to have time for myself on weekends. So, and I also wanted to travel the country, but also I'm a homebody who likes to spend a lot of time at home. So it kind of ended up making sense to convert a school bus to be my mobile office that I can travel around in. And it's like, seemingly incompatible things, really. And I know I've had, I remember having like another therapist friend kind of be like, who's going to want a therapist in a bus, and well, now they do. Right? It's not so strange anymore after the pandemic. So, it's just, I think it's really amazing what we can do when we decide to put two seemingly opposable things together and bridge that gap. And it doesn't mean that it's easy. It's often a real mind bender of an experiment, but it's cool to see what can come out of those things. And it does take courage. And because a lot of times it means holding a vision for something that we want that everyone around us thinks is stupid and or impossible. And so we can either adopt their beliefs about it, or we can, like you said, stay more in alignment with our values, even if they're different from other people's.
So was there some type of event or a person that gave you the courage to step out and do this? And I just want to say I moved my practice online in 2019 as well. And at that time, there was a lot of people with lots of opinions about that. And then the pandemic came along and that changed that a lot. But so you were doing this pre-pandemic. So not only were you going to be all virtual, but then you're traveling as well. So what gave you the courage to do that?
That is not an easy question to answer. I think it was a series of things, most likely. I've always loved to travel, and I started doing all these cross-country road trips back in like 2009, and just sort of fell in love with being on the road. I fell in love with being out west. I've always loved traveling to other countries, and I just knew that I wanted to experience as much of the world as I could while I was here on Earth. And then throughout all of that too, I've always been a spiritual seeker, and I've had a couple of what I consider to be like spiritual awakening experiences that gave me just sort of a more tangible awareness of the fact that we're on a ball of dust spinning around in outer space, and we don't really know what's going on here or what life is really about. And so we've got all of these cultural constructs and human constructs that we're living within, and I honor those, and I want to be a part of those, and I'm into it, and I want to be creative within that. And I also know that life is this sort of big mysterious thing that I don't fully understand, and I don't want to be limited to those little constructs either. While I do honor them, I don't want to be limited by them. And so I think that gives me courage, is just sort of my spiritual faith, which I can barely even put words to. But, I think anyone who's got some of that for themselves knows just the sort of more tactile quality of that, and how it can give us courage when we need it. And yeah, so I think those are the main things for me, is just knowing that time is limited. There's a big mystery going on, and I want to participate in this way.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And so as part of the introduction of what we were going to talk about, we were talking about how lifestyle design can help you with self-care and sustainability in your work and all those things. So for someone who's listening and might think, well, it's not always just about your own pleasure and what, makes you happy in your life. There's a balance. Well, this is a way to bring other aspects into it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And the truth is that while I fully claim and design my lifestyle, it's still really hard, and I still have to do like difficult stuff, and I'm not feeling full-time pleasure or anything along those lines, and I still find that service is really important, and community is really important, and family and friends are really important, and going to the laundromat and going to the grocery store, like it's all just kind of the same stuff. I just like I said, I have a different backyard every few days, and it's been a way to actually deepen connections with people, because I've got friends all over the country and people that I wouldn't see if I just lived in one stationary place. But I guess what you're kind of addressing is like that fear that so many of us have of being perceived as selfish.
Hmm?
Is that kind of what you're asking about?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, screw them. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, so many preconceived ideas. Like these people with brand new private practices will start saying like, okay, I know I need to give back, so I need to have a sliding scale, or I need to have some pro bono positions. And I'm like, that's a financial decision for your business. That's not an assume I can do this, but build the business so that it's sustainable, and then figure out how you want to volunteer. Like, I don't think therapists have to do free or discounted sessions as the only way they can support their community. It might be they don't want to volunteer in that way at all, because their work, fills them up and hits, like, maximizes their tolerance at times. But they do want to go volunteer at the SPCA and play with kittens or something, And so we have these preconceived ideas in our field about if you're going to be private pay or do this or this, what you need to do to make it acceptable to others so that we're not being selfish.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, I think it's a lot of lies we've been told. I think that most of us get into this work because we're kind of innately not selfish, and it's often not enough for us to just do work. We want to do work that's meaningful in its nature. And then on top of that, to have pressures that we do more work for free is just, I mean, who else lives by these standards? Like, we have to, as therapists, we jump through so many hoops to just make sure that we're doing no harm and that we're actually serving and helping people. And we jump through a lot of those hoops at our own expense. And then so many other people, so many other jobs have truly detrimental impacts on people, and they don't have to jump through any of those hoops, and they're not even pretending that they're out to help anybody. And it just seems a bit messed up to me, I guess, just all of the layers of guilt and stuff that get put on people in helping professions, like. And something that I remember hearing once, forgive me for not knowing where, is kind of this idea that if somebody's like spending a lot of time accusing someone else of being selfish, is it also that they're just kind of saying that person needs to pay attention to them instead? Like, isn't it kind of selfish to accuse someone else of being selfish? This is a touchy topic.
I'm sure. Here. Well, but
we need to be careful in that area, and feeling like everything's always on us as therapists to be like these perfect humans that are always doing good and giving of ourselves endlessly. I think that that's taking a real toll on a lot of people in helping professions and leading to compassion fatigue and burnout. So it's not like I'm promoting like, no, you should just totally shift to a completely selfish life. I'm more of the mind of, how do we serve ourselves so that we can also serve other people better? Because we don't serve well when we're drained and empty and feeling frustrated by our lives, or going home every day and just wanting to cry ourselves to sleep. We're not helping people as well when we're feeling that way.
Right. And I think some of our national organizations are finally getting an understanding of this. And hopefully this is going to, translate into the grad schools, maybe training people differently. But, when we're taught that we are going to work really hard, we're going to see too many people, we're not going to make good money, but we're going to be making a big difference. We're also not taught, while we're being told all of that, that there's so many gray areas and ethical gray areas in our work that kind of toll is not something that we even discuss or talk about how to take care of ourselves. And so we're coming back then to the NASW, National Association of Social Workers, added a year or two ago to their ethics that therapists need to be providing self-care to themselves. And that's part of our ethics now, which I think is hugely helpful that a national organization is seeing it and naming this, so that maybe we're going to start getting this shift of, okay, well, we can't just burn these people out and expect that they're just kind of still keep doing the work. They're going to burn out and leave the work,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that is a big move. And yeah, you're right. I do hope that translates into our education, because, I remember when I was working at a recovery center, it was kind of funny. Like, there was a little bit of prioritizing it, but it was more just like, are you taking care of yourself? And there wasn't, it was just like that. And there was no real guidance on how to do it, or really like space created to do it. It was just sort of make sure you're doing it, whatever that is.
Right. And it's one of those things that we tell all of our clients to do that we never do, because, well, for a lot of different reasons, but yeah.
Yeah, well, hopefully we do some of it, but for those environments to create the space and the tools for therapists to actually care for themselves, I think will be really important. But in the meantime, I think it's great that more therapists are building their own practices in a way that is set up so that they can actually sustain it long term and enjoy their practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And so do you do like periodic assessments to say, because like you were saying, we fall back into old habits. So do you periodically look at your lifestyle design and think, is this still working for me? Are there areas I need to shift?
Yeah, not as regimentedly as I would suggest other people do it, but I absolutely am always kind of just looking at the big picture of my life and doing my best to make adjustments where they're needed. And part of what it was for me was I wanted to design my lifestyle for freedom. So it's actually like, it's not about the bus, it's about the freedom. And this is just the current literal vehicle for that freedom. But I am thinking about, what I would like my lifestyle to look like in the next couple of years. And I think it might look a little bit different coming up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just even keeping an open mind that you can change that is something that a lot of people don't even consider, I would imagine.
Yeah. And I frankly do find it a little challenging even for myself, it's that whole kind of getting stuck in an identity, almost like forgetting that we're not the identity, but we're the person experiencing these many, many chapters of life. And I really have always loved change and kind of thrived on making big changes every handful of years. So, but it can certainly be scary every time, because, oh, what is it going to mean to all of these people who are used to me showing up in this way for all these years? And now I'm going to flip it. And it's like, I think it's another way we can kind of step out of ourselves and out of our own true desires and genuine needs in order to sort of try to keep other people comfortable, which, we all know it's a sweet thing to do, and it's not all bad, but it comes with its costs, and we have to be just thoughtful about that, because people will adapt to me living differently, and that's going to be okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess you will build confidence as well. The more you do this, the more you shift and flex and try it a different way, the easier it is get to say, okay, well, I know there's probably going to be some unexpected things that come up, but I know that from past experience, I'm going to figure it out and make it work. And, it's okay to do the thing that you're wanting to do.
Yeah. And a big part of lifestyle design is just making experiments, just trying things out in small ways, and making sure that something really is what you want it to be before you dive all the way into it. And those experiments are also just great ways of bringing variety into life too, which is fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So important. So you coach people in this. I don't know if coach is the word that you use.
Best word I've come up with.
Yeah. 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 So tell me what that looks like. So someone comes to you and they're like, yeah, I feel like I want to do something different, but I don't really know what that should be, or don't know how I can make it happen. Is that sort of the starting point that people come to you with?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, people have all kinds of circumstances, but I do find that a lot of people are, just really tend to be fed up a lot of times with their work situation, and they're thinking about what's next. And while I'm not a business coach, I do find that all of the lifestyle design work really applies to all the different areas of somebody's life. So, if they're thinking about how they could build a business for themselves, I just encourage them to think about what their lifestyle outside of that business is going to be like as well, so that they can, make it all jive together. So I've put together a 10-week program, basically, that kind of is the hybrid of an online course and then one-on-one and group coaching. So it's kind of an intensive period of time for somebody in a really pivotal point in their life to just really make sure that they're clear. Like I said, authenticity first. How can we just know what those needs are that we have, and make sure that whatever we're designing is going to fill those? And then we kind of expand with the imagination to, remember all the things that they used to want and why that was, and dive into the core values and the emotions that they want to have, and really just try to get an understanding of why they want what they want first, and then go into strategy and plan and actually get into the action steps to make it happen. And then throughout all of it, diving into some of the mindset and the psychology that will just help them to, keep going and be resilient and manage those obstacles. And also just, I think it's really important to, make sure that we're doing our best to love every day of the journey while we're working towards the goal, so that the goal doesn't become some really disappointing means to an end, because we've all achieved goals. And then if we don't have the skill of savoring our accomplishments and being in the present moment and enjoying that accomplishment, then we're just on to the next one, and it doesn't really alter the course of our life all that much. So, how do we enjoy the journey of moving towards the goal, so that the goal is more of a cherry on top of an already pretty fulfilling life, rather than this thing that we're desperate to get towards?
I think that's such a great reminder that, they say it's about the journey, not the destination. And it's the things that happen along the way, that the destination is sort of like your guiding star, I would imagine. And then, yeah. But it's about the experiences you're having. But as you were talking, I was also just reflecting that, like, we do this with clients as therapists. We help them do these exact things. And again, like so many of the things that we encourage our clients to do, we don't necessarily do for ourselves. And so this is a thing that a therapist could say, okay, you're right. Yeah, I've been encouraging my clients to figure out how they can change their life so they can be happier, whether that's, distancing themselves from a toxic relationship, or, the different things they might be doing, moving to getting a different job. All of those things we do with them, and we can do for ourselves as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the doing it for ourselves that really gives us that deep understanding that allows us to help other people move through it too. I mean, I think it makes it so much more powerful when we have that firsthand experience.
I agree. Yeah. And so much of what we do in our jobs as therapists is we get this, on the job training in our lives. So many of us end up working in, with a population that's similar to a life experience that we've had, that we have like a deep understanding of what that experience is like.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I've been really grateful to be a therapist and connect with a lot of people whose lives are totally different from mine and who I maybe wouldn't have interacted with otherwise. I've found those to be just really precious experiences too.
I agree. And I feel like it's really helped me to be a better person in general. Like someone's rude to me in the grocery store and I think about a client that's dealing with this awful thing. And I'm like, well, maybe that person has this awful thing they're dealing with. And so I'm going to be patient and give them some space because I don't know what they're dealing with. And, prior to that, I'm being a therapist, I might have just thought like, well, that person's a real jerk, and be annoyed. But
right.
I've learned to be more tolerant.
Yeah. And you made me kind of think about that in how it kind of relates to travel too, and just when we're in one place experiencing the same people over and over again, it's just a really limited perspective on what the world is like and a limited perspective on what perspectives make sense too. And so I think that, the more people we talk to, whether it's in the therapy room or whether it's out on the street in different cities and towns, it really just can help us to open up to the world in a way that I think is really important, especially when everybody seems so divided right now.
I agree. Yeah. And I feel like there's so many online spaces to meet therapists these days. And I know for a fact that my life has been incredibly enriched by colleagues that I've met online that I've never met in person, that, we chat, I get their opinion, they get mine, maybe we're going to end up in the same state for something and we can meet up, but just like expanding your exposure to other good humans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm really thankful for all of that. So many people think that Facebook, they just find it to be a real negative thing. But I mean, I found it to be kind of the opposite. Not to say that there aren't things on there that aren't kind of tasteless or that I could do without, but I think it's what you make of it. And I have also connected with a lot of people I never would have met. And I also try to take those extra steps to meet people in real life and take those sort of artificial friendships and make them real. And that has been extremely valuable for me, especially as a traveler too, because, I have run into people in the most random places and it's just really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So are there particular resources that obviously you offer coaching with this, and we're going to put that information in the show notes. Are there other resources though for somebody who wants to explore this a little bit more, but maybe before they're ready to reach out to you?
Yeah. So I mentioned kind of my big 10-week program. I also have a couple of mini courses that I've put together. So those are on my website for really low cost. But as far as free resources, the Stanford Life Design Lab has some really cool free resources and videos that would be worth checking out for people who are interested in this. And I've put a couple of things on YouTube. I like to think there's value in there. So it all really just depends on kind of what somebody needs in terms of their next steps. But I think that even just getting to that point of making commitment to treating the next 20 or 30 years of your life like they really matter is just such an important step.
Yeah. And that was another, it's hard to say the pandemic was a gift. There certainly were gifts that came with it. And one is, losing people unexpectedly to, to COVID, and then getting like a new outlook on life. Like, wow, I thought I was going to have that person in my life for 20 more years and they're gone and I couldn't even be with them when they died. And now I'm going to make sure every single day I'm making the most of it,
Mm-hmm. Darn straight. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge perspective shift that when we get it, I think it really can turn a lot on its head. And to live every day like it could be our last, while also keeping in mind that we probably are going to have another couple decades, I think is a really a powerful place to live in.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
agree. I love that so much. Yeah, yeah.
Waste a lot of time otherwise.
I agree. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you my question of the episode. If you have a favorite catchphrase or analogy that you like to use with clients?
Yeah. So we'll go with the coaching one. So if you don't design your life, someone else is going to do it for you and they won't ask for your input. So
Yeah.
I just think it's really important to think about that and thinking about how many of us are kind of living every day working towards somebody else's dream.
Mm-hmm.
And what could happen if more of us really worked every day towards creating our own dream? So I think
Mm-hmm.
we all come in with a real sense of passion and purpose if we dig for it. And even if that passion and purpose is supporting someone else's dream, at least own it as your dream too, and then that's going to really kind of light a fire under your butt to like live big and live fully. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've so enjoyed having you on today, Andrea. Thank you so much for coming. So I'm going to put notes in the show notes about where they can reach you, but in general, where is the best place for people to find you?
The best place would be aliveexplorations.com or also on Facebook or Instagram at Alive Explorations.
Cool. I love that name. Okay. So we'll put those things in the show notes. For everyone listening, there are new episodes of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast released every Thursday on all major platforms. Please remember, our work is hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely. Thank you so much for listening to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to colleaguedownthehall.com, where you'll be able to learn more about getting the clinical support you need and resources to help you work in a supported, sustainable way. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your therapy friends and colleagues. Subscribe to the podcast, and if you love this episode, please leave a review.